innovations are not necessarily replacing other experience. They're just expanding our world of experience. It's not either or. We're not either going to work at the office or work in Zoom. This is just going to become another layer that maybe improves our lives and flexibility, but it's not going to replace our personal interactions. 100% not.
Hi everyone, welcome back for yet another episode of the IBD podcast. I'm Julia De Mauro, your host as usual, and I really hope you had a great summer break, even though the conditions were not perfect, but I still hope that everybody is back and energized and ready for September. I'm quite positive that it will go much better than the rest of 2020. So let's see what happens. I feel like we went back to business as usual. So very exciting times. We have on her side concentrated on a new project, which I will discuss with you in a minute. Today's episode is going to be on the theme of taking back the streets in terms of community, in terms of architecture, and the guest for today comes straight from New York. It's the owner of a very renowned international practice. They have done projects all over the world, and I'm extremely excited to have you listen to the episodes that we recorded together. I just wanted to give you an introduction a little bit of our new important innovative project. So to give you a little bit of background, the IBD company was founded in 2018, and the goal was to help architects, engineer companies and real estate developers to find projects abroad and basically develop their company internationally. Of course, we were hit also by the corona crisis because we didn't have any more visibility on international markets for a couple of months. So for us, it was an opportunity to basically start a new project that we had in mind. So we founded the sister company of the IBD company, which is basically a hub for innovation. So we tried to concentrate on this new project during these months, and now it finally gave birth to a new digital platform focused on business development for creative industries, architects, engineers, and real estate developers. We have 3 types of services. We have consultancies for companies who can hire us in order to solve any business issues that they may encounter. And we also discuss how the company can innovate and be more visible on digital platforms and within the market in general. And how to find clients during also social distancing situations. Next to this consultancy service, we also have a mentoring program, which is a one-to-one coaching and package that is more focused on architects who are starting their own practice and don't know where to start. And finally, very soon, we will have an online course about digital business development. So how to do lead generations, how to find your clients and be visible online in the industry. And I'm very excited today to introduce you to all of these services. So you can go on our website and check it out. Just go on the IBD hub.com, and you can directly book consultancy and mentoring directly online with us on a Zoom call. So please check it out. So now to our episode. Our guest today is Eran Chen, founder of ODA New York. Hi, Eran, and welcome to a new episode of the IBD podcast. I'm very happy to have you on this episode today.
Thank you. Great to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. So you have founded ODA in 2007. And since then, you are one of the most prolific architects in New York. Your work has been published around the world, of course, in hundreds of design magazines and journals. And you're a frequent speaker in architecture universities and conferences. And you work at the moment on multiple projects, but a couple of projects that struck me in particular are the Postkantoor in Rotterdam, a master plan in Moscow, and of course the historic Book Tower in Detroit. And you have published also one of your latest book called Unboxing New York. So a lot of things that you have been doing in those few years. And I have a first question for you. I would like to know what has been the motivation behind ODA, like your why factor during those years and all these projects.
Sure. First of all, thanks for the introduction, Julia. It's a pleasure. I think as a person, as a human being, and also as an architect, I'm interested in improving people's life. I remember as a child that I kind of monitored myself, my well-being, my mood in relationship to architecture. Back then, I didn't think of architecture as a profession. I just thought of it as an environment. And maybe because I moved a lot in my life as a child, and maybe because my parents are divorced and I moved back and forth from different countries and different cities, the impact of my built environment, my surroundings on my well-being was something I remember being very aware of at a very young age. And that became a passion of mine, how we can improve people's quality of life physically, emotionally, how we can improve our relationship with one another, with our environment through the tool, if you will, that is called architecture. And that's been really a driving force for me personally and for our firms in general. And I think we've honed, as I've kind of matured to this profession, we've honed on big cities, not only because that's where architecture matters today, and not only because that's where most people reside today and in the future, but because that's the place that needs most help, I feel. Yeah. So that's what drives us forward.
But you also have worked in completely different cities with totally different problems, I imagine. So
yes, we work diversified geographically. We work now on so many different cities and countries, the diversity of cultures and problems. But they all unite, in my mind, into one component, which is how we can improve people's life in their particular location, facing their particular challenges. It's surprising, but there's even though geographically we work in so many different locations, there's uniting problems that are common to all of us right now, and the world is becoming global, and our problems are global, and our challenges are global. So there's some threads here.
Yeah, and what would you say is one of the biggest challenges that you're facing in your most recent projects?
Well, I'll start by saying we can't ignore the fact that the world right now is in turmoil, and the pandemic have brought us at least a perception of a shifting point, that there's something that is happening. And, you know, I also describe it sometimes as schizophrenia in the types of moods that people have. And I have myself between huge hope and excitement about the possibilities of the future, with days of depression and I would say kind of depressed mode about the future of cities and what would happen there. So, you know, as an architect, you must be an optimist. I said that many times. You can't dream far without being optimistic about the future. And I'm personally extremely optimistic about the futures of cities. But there is a perception right now that is clearly differs between different places. And the perception is gloomy about the future of cities, with a concern that density is a bad thing more than it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And density and pollution and noise and crime, all of these things are bringing social injustice and social challenges and financial hardships. All of these elements are piling up where people are saying, you know, should we reconsider this whole structure? And maybe, you know, we should leave the cities, or maybe we should do something else that is radical. So I think that's a challenge that I feel brings to a peak something that has been built up for a long time.
Yeah.
Which is, how do we live together? And that's a question that fascinates me. And regardless if we do a project in Moscow or in South America or in Paris or Detroit, DC or New York, these questions are coming up in different contexts and in different ways. How do we live together in the future?
Yeah, I can imagine that if you have a project in New York versus Detroit, the way of living together or bringing people together would be completely different in a way. So I remember being at your talk for the Postkantoor in Rotterdam, and you were explaining how you were trying to bring back the street life and the community life to New York through your projects. But I can imagine that in a city like Detroit, where it's more, it's less dense for sure, and where this community is maybe lacking even more, you would want to go about it in a completely different way, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think that the common thread maybe is that new cities or modern cities were designed for cars, and not so much for people. And some of them were designed before the cars arrived for horse and carriage. But the essential structure, urban structures of cities, although they diverse and they're very different in terms of their density, in terms of the relationship between this sort of the streetscapes and the built environment, they're all sharing one major challenge, which is the main structure is what we call the street. And a street, which seems like the most obvious and common thing to me, is in a major question right now, because the street, regardless if it's in Detroit or in New York City or in Rotterdam, is predominantly captured by asphalts and steel boxes called cars. And pedestrians are secondary to that experience. I mean, with some exceptions, of course. You take a city like Amsterdam, which is close to you, and I remember in my first visits, if you're in a car, you're the enemy. You're in minority. First and foremost importance is the biker. The second is the pedestrian walker, and cars is way back. And that's a great experience. But if you take a city like Detroit, for example, a city that was definitely was built on the foundations of the car industry. The predominant experience is very wide streets with a lot of asphalts and a lot of parking lots that surrounding it, with very little, almost minimal activity or other programs at the ground floor that allows creates a desire for people to spend time or walk between point A to point B. New York City has exactly the opposite experience, but the fundamental problem is the same, where there's so much density in the streets that the streets are not enough in their capacity to accommodate that because they're designed for cars. So we reach this problem from a different spectrums, but the solution is somewhere in the middle, which is how do we create more excitement and more activity in streets in cities like Detroit or Rotterdam, where the streets are kind of empty from pedestrian life? And what's the right way to do it? Because the traditional way of doing it through retail or linear retail experience is also, as we know, not as exciting and not as attractive anymore. So what are the new ways by which you can bring people to celebrate their public realm, the space that they own in a city like Rotterdam or Detroit? And in New York, how do we carve out new spaces, new type of spaces from the infrastructure that exists to accommodate the need for that? So at the end, I think we're going to end in a similar place.
Yeah, and I think that maybe for this subject, the corona situation is kind of going to have a positive impact and an opportunity for that. I don't know how it is in New York right now, but here, at least in the Netherlands, all the restaurants and all the shops have invaded the walking path, which basically has kind of reduced the amount of cars as well that are allowed in the cities. So we're taking back the streets in a way, and that needs to be organized also in a very specific and safe manner. I don't know how it is in New York, since the pathway was already quite busy. So could you tell me a little bit?
No, you're totally correct. New York is similar. What you see, which is beautiful, is how restaurants are taking over parking spots and building outdoor seating that looks more permanent and expanding the public realm from the sidewalk, which is really just a conveyor of people to move. They say about New York City that you can't stop even if you want to. If you walk the streets of New York and you want to take a break and sit outside, just have an espresso, there's very little place for this to do that. So the expansion is true in New York as well. The coronavirus has really brought us to a point of conversion. That's why I think it's such an important moment in our life right now. On one hand, we're afraid of being with other people. So the idea of congregation in general, the idea of many people in one place, is counterintuitive to the idea of the disease. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, so people just want to leave, they want to stay in home, they don't want to do anything. On the other hand, we feel the urgency that is building up through this month that you can't avoid for people to want to be with each other, which is really the answer at the end of the day for the gloomy idea of cities are dead. They're never going to die. But you see that, and then the expansion required on the public realm on areas that maybe are not as important anymore. Is it really important for us to park on two sides of the streets with these big empty steel boxes we call cars, while we can accommodate hundreds of thousands of millions of people in restaurant seating area? So yes, I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah. And you always say density is our friend. Mm-hmm. Do you still believe that now? Or
absolutely. Look, I think that first and foremost, I believe that people are social creatures, that beyond anything else, we love to be, if not with each other, at least next to each other. The excitement of being around others is at the core of who we are as people. And therefore, density is something that supports that. The other thing that density does is it creates accessibility to so much richness. If it's business, if it's experiential, because you concentrate these kind of you concentrate people and put them together, which allows us to walk from place to place, to experience a lot of stuff in a close distance. The challenge with density is that it's overwhelming, or it could be overwhelming. And what people are concerned about is that when you over-densify an area, both the infrastructure and the feeling becomes an overwhelmed. It's overwhelmed. There's too much of us per square foot, too much garbage, too much noise, too much pollution, too many people to make friends. And it's our responsibility to organize our built environment through architecture to accommodate the beautiful elements and advantages of density, but to do it in a way that is not overwhelming, and maintaining our sanity and maintaining our intimacy and maintaining our friendship. And that's the challenge. And for example, I'll give you an example. We're working on a major master plan right now in Queens called Innovation Queens. Mm-hmm. And it's 6 city blocks that will be kind of reimagined. Right now, they're mostly empty, reimagined as an extension inward of already a vibrant community. And the basic thing to do when you look at this is you're taking the existing infrastructure, which is basically a series of streets. You put your buildings, you arrange them in different heights, and you're hoping for the best. We said, both to the developer and the city, look, this formula doesn't work anymore. We need to think of pockets of interactions at the street level, the urban level, that would allow for different experiences. And therefore, we dedicated 25% of the private footprint of the land that otherwise would just be a footprint for a building as an open space at the ground floor. And now you're taking the heart or the block of the city, and instead of just filling it up, you carve out areas and you program them beautifully and carefully to create a sequence of open spaces with different characters that can be walked, that are walkable, that is accessible to all. And they become a supplementary, not a replacement, but a supplementary to the street system. And I think that's an exciting way of looking at cities in the future. Now, one thing about a city like Rotterdam, for example, and maybe we can talk about our project there a little, is that these spaces, you don't have to invent them. They exist already. These pockets of areas that are underutilized and they're unprogrammed exist. The city is not fully built, if you will. And what we need to do is recognize them and articulate the ground floor that surrounds them in a way that would attract people to have some sort of an experience. And that's what we've done at Post Rotterdam, because we've taken a building that is a monument, that has an historical gravity, but that within the building accommodate these two amazing kind of halls, the historical Great Hall, and then the courtyard used to be just a delivery, a support courtyard. And we said, let's enhance them as pockets of activity. How beautiful that is. They're just by Koolsingel, a street that the city wants to activate. Yeah. You can't just activate Koolsingel by drawing people and trees on a street if they don't have places to go and congregate. And then carve these and redefine those spaces with the right program to create this exciting meeting space.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I mean, for Rotterdam, it's really a weird city. I think it's comparable maybe to Detroit in a way, because it's an industrial kind of city. It was built without a proper master plan and without, a lot of directions and a lot of rules, let's say. So it is known for a lot of architects practicing and trying out different kind of architectures. And now we see that there is a lot of buildings that are maybe empty, or like some street levels that are not activated because of the width of the streets. So I think that that's also why I liked the post-Cantour so much, is because it's preserving this historical building that most of Rotterdam people actually don't know, because it has been closed for years now.
Yeah.
And it will give a chance for people to discover that, and in the same time to reactivate one of the most important corners of the city, actually, because it is an important one. And I really hope that that will then trigger other activations in the rest of the city center, which for now it's just an addition of multiple streets put together, but there is not like really a heart of the city center.
I think there's no uniting elements that allows for the public realm. But that's why, especially as a New Yorker, when I come to Rotterdam, which became sort of second city for me for the past, 3 years, what I see is an unbelievable opportunity. So maybe living there, there's some set of disappointment from the city center ability to kind of reactivate, but I see this as an amazing opportunity. Because the energy of the people of Rotterdam, the excitement, the entrepreneurship, the formation of art and culture exists already. And now as an architect, I feel like we're going back to the basic. Our role as architects is to create a platform for these people to exploit their potential, their humanity, their culture, their excitement. And there's so many potential places in downtown Rotterdam that exist. You don't have to recreate them. You just have to smartly adjust them, either through adaptive reuse or through an innovative way of looking at a program, but also through density. Density is our friend. Bringing more people downtown would allow us to activate places that are empty.
Yeah, the government actually, especially in Rotterdam, is trying now to investigate to increase the density by copying a little bit New York and give the right of air above the buildings.
Right, but this is where the risk is, the risk and the opportunity, right? The idea of adding, let's call them towers, vertical buildings above existing, the idea of infusing more people that live in the city to create density is a great one. And the diversity of program is really important. But unless the tower, let's call it a tower, add something meaningful at the public realm, at the ground floor, that allow for this increased density to congregate and to exploit, then it's lacking. Then we are risking a downtown city that it's densified but not compelling in terms of its public realm. And I would say in zoning, we need to demand both. We need to allow for vertical expansion, bringing more density, but with that, we need a proof of the contribution of every one of those buildings to the public realm at the ground level. If we do that, I think we're going to be in a good shape.
Yeah. Do you believe in streets above ground?
Well, no. First of all, the idea of a street, as I said before, to me, we need a new vocabulary. The idea of street as a conveyor of public movement has to be re-examined. And another conveyor, another street above ground doesn't do anything but reduce the density and the excitement on the ground. Mm. What we do need, though, above ground is we need more places of gathering. And that's very different. In other words, the street or the ground floor, let's call it the public realm, should still maintain as the main priority conveyor of people from point A to point B and expand on its pockets of, of congregation, of excitement, of activities, But these pockets should and could continue and grow up and accommodate different types of activity that relates to the different type of intimacy. And let me break it down in a second for you. A terrace in an apartment is a gathering space for a family by which there's a connectivity to the intimate world of our life to the outside world. Let's call it nature. That's a plaza. A terrace is a plaza. It's a plaza on a small scale of a unit of a family or individual. And that's great to have. And I hope that this pandemic has shown how important it is in our homes. A building could have many apartments with many little plazas, which are terraces, but the community of the buildings are becoming substantial. Sometimes I say the tower is a new neighborhood, because you might have hundreds of people living in one building. So they need their own communal plaza, which is separated from the public plaza. And what is that plaza? So, people are doing these amenities, and this is something that came to, I think, to our acknowledgement in the past 10 years. Okay, let's create amenities, a gym, a lounge, a kids' playroom. But unfortunately, instead of thinking of these elements as an architectural opportunity of a plaza, of a meeting place, of an interaction place, it became what we call a Chinese menu of different boxes in the building. Oh, there's a gym. Oh, there's a this. That's a mistake. We need to consolidate those elements and create those public gathering spaces in the air. So it's not an upper streets per se. It's more of a series of urban plazas that kind of infiltrate, starts at the street level, and become all the way up to our private unit as a terrace.
Yeah. And that would therefore also increase the quality of living and the quality of space as well, right?
Yes, because it's going to address the question that we talked about before, which is the density as an overwhelming factor. We're designing a tower now in Seattle. It's going to be one of the tallest residential tower in downtown Seattle, and it's a vertical building. But we created a gap in the middle, which is extend the entire footprint of that tower. And the gap is equal to a neighborhood garden, because it's about 200 feet by 100 feet, or in meters, it's about 30 by 50 meters. It's big. And that became an elevated garden for the people of the building itself. It becomes a place where you can not only gather in a garden, which is not outside the street, but you can look at the view and enjoy. And that's the type of architecture pockets that I think we can create in buildings.
I don't know if you want to talk about that article that you read, that you told me about New York is dead.
Just before we started, that there was an article that I read yesterday. It's not a masterpiece, but it was called "New York City is Dead,"
mm-hmm.
And it went through every aspect of what we love about the city and demonstrate how not only it's dead right now, but there's no chance for it to revive. It explicitly explained that the idea of New York City as a hub for business is not relevant anymore because of the bandwidth of our internet, and that through Zoom meetings we can do any meetings, we can meet anyone everywhere in the world, and therefore being in New York is not necessarily that important. It talked about the retail shopping as an element that is dying. It talked about restaurant and food as an element that is dead. Talked about culture, that Lincoln Center and Broadway shows are going to be closed at least for the next year. And it basically said everything we love about New York City is dead forever, and it's not going to come back. And the idea, the perception of that being true is what driving so many people out of the city. And the most fascinating thing to me is that perception creates reality and not the other way around. What we perceive as individuals, as people, really influence our actions, which therefore creates reality. It's true in politics and everything else. And the concern is that perception is going to overwhelmingly um, send people out of cities in a way that would never recover. But I have to say to that, although this was quite scary to read and quite disturbing, that I feel that it has kind of fallen in a very pivotal point, or two pivotal points. One, I'd actually say three. One, unlike people, cities can die and come back to life. People can die forever. Cities can die for a short period of time, and they come back to life. Two, the invention of internet or bandwidth is not going to replace the personal interactions, just like airplanes didn't replace the experience of ships. Frankly, people travel more in airplanes, but the amount of people that goes on cruises in the ocean is bigger than ever before. Innovations are not necessarily replacing other experiences, they're just expanding our world of experience. It's not either or. We're not either going to work at the office or work in Zoom. This is just going to become another layer that maybe improves our lives and flexibility, but it's not going to replace our personal interactions, 100% not. So that's the second fault of this article. And the third one is that the resiliency of cities is highly underestimated, because even in times of terrible times of New York City, which is 9/11 or Sandy or other historical Great Recession, the city always came back. And the reason is because this is the most sustainable way to live. We can't ignore that fact. If people are now saying we're all going to go back to the suburbia and take over more land from Mother Nature and ignore the elements of sustainability risk, it's counterintuitive. We have to go back to cities to sustain our world. And second, because we love to be together, and cultural intrigue and opportunity and personal interaction is not going to be replaced.
No, for sure. And also, like, if I personally believe that if New York is dead, then most of cities in the world would be dead before New York, actually. Because, I mean, I think that New York is the perfect representation of a metropolitan city, in terms of skill, in terms of people, in terms of functions that there is, and how it has been articulated through the years. So in my opinion, maybe that would never happen, or it's very doubtful. What I think, although, is that there will be a shift within the functions of the city in general, because many office spaces will not be utilized anymore. So we will have to think about new ways of using that space, and there might be new functions that come along as well, where
absolutely. And there lies the opportunity and the excitement that I'm really overwhelmed by anticipation to what's going to happen, is how we collectively are going to find these innovative solutions that we didn't think about before to replace the dying retail. It doesn't mean that the streetscape is going to die, and there's never going to be any person walking the streets of New York or doing shopping at all. It just means that it's going to change. And office buildings in Midtown that has been built for about 60 to 100 years, that seems irrelevant anymore as structures for Class A office, what can we do with them? Can we convert them into vertical neighborhoods? Can we cut into the depth of these and create more outdoor spaces? Can we create more public meeting spaces from these infrastructure? You can't underestimate the inquisitivity of humankind, and the innovation that would come with it. We just have to be patient. And as an architect, this is the best time ever, because you can really start letting your mind go out there and come up with those future ideas.
Yeah, and it also brings an opportunity, because more and more we were trying to shrink the office spaces, and we were trying to maximize the apartment spaces, etc., etc. And I think we're now going into a reversed situation where people will need more space, more quality of space, and have those community spaces where they can also have their safe zone in a way. So probably it's going to counterbalance certain things that we have done in the past in a good way.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like a pendulum. It's you see extreme scenarios. For example, when we start seeing those skinny towers, those vertical towers, and I think 157th Street is perhaps New York's latest example, where the tower itself is so tall and so skinny that the percentage of area used on every given floor is like 50%, because the rest is core and structure. When we see apartments that are shrinking to a size of a room, we understand that the pendulum came to some extreme cases, and now it's going to swing back. So yes, I think it's very exciting. And historically, when we're going to look back, we're going to say, do you remember the 2020s? Where we built these vertical towers that are like so thin, and when we have people, lived in apartments that are 200 square foot or 20 square meters. Do you remember those days? And how out of that came a totally way of looking at life in cities.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for all of this knowledge and for being with me today on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. I will put your website and your social media links in the description of the podcast, so everybody can, of course, see your beautiful projects and be updated. Do you have anything else to add that maybe I haven't pointed out?
No, I'm looking forward, Julia, to meet you in person when all of this is behind us in Rhode Island. I'm looking forward also for our project, The Post, to start construction. I think that they're on the verge of starting. The pandemic has stopped that. It would be unbelievable in 2 years, when we come in 2 to 3 years and we see this building alive. A piece of my heart and my soul is now in Rotterdam, and I'm looking forward to be there and to continue and contribute to that city and others in the Netherlands. And thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I'm very excited to see all your projects coming to life finally. Thank you, Eran. See you soon.
All right. You. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to check out our new website, theiwdhub.com, and to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, because we will keep posting throughout the week new videos, new tips, and new business ideas. So keep an eye on it, and see you next week.